Well, now to take a look at what's happening on the international desk and what it has in store for us this week, we're joined by SABC News correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Sherwin, it's never an easy week for you. What are you looking at this week that's keeping you busy?
Well, quite a few important stories on the agenda. As you know, Oliver, there is a continuing government shutdown in the United States that has pitted Democrats in the Senate against their Republican colleagues. And essentially, Democrats here using their very limited leverage in the Senate, right? You have a sort of 53-47 split in terms of the Republican majority there, but they need 60. But they need 60 votes to get this funding. And Democrats have dug in here over expiring healthcare subsidies, cuts to programs like Medicaid that really delivers healthcare to impoverished Americans, people suffering with disabilities, and many others. And what Democrats are seeking to do here is to prevent a lapse in subsidies by the end of the year that could increase premiums for some families up to $25,000 a year. And so they believe that this is a hill on which to die on, Oliver. The Democrats really investing the little leverage they have in the Senate to block this legislation that would essentially open the government at funding levels, at existing funding levels. But they believe that were they to acquiesce to that funding legislation, they then lose their ability to demand certain prescriptions in terms of healthcare, excuse the pun there. And so this is a fight that is playing itself out. It is now the second longest government shutdown in U.S. history. And let me remind you, when the first happened, it was also during a Trump administration in 2018 when the government was shut down for some 35 days. We are moving closely towards that threshold. And the concern here is that it's impacting services. Millions, over 1 million federal workers have been furloughed. Some are not getting paid. The military doesn't get paid. TSA employees that deal with security at airports are not being paid. Air traffic controllers are not being paid. And so the implications, if this continues to drag on, is quite severe in terms of air traffic control and the fluidity of government services across this country writ large.
Has this been the longest standing shutdown in modern history?
Not yet. Close to that, 35 days will be the longest, and we're heading in that direction.
Yeah. Let's talk about the U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean off of the coast of Venezuela, which continues with the deployment of an aircraft carrier group.
We could be on the cusp here of a major escalation. As you know, for a number of weeks, since around September, the United States has carried out these strikes against alleged drug-carrying vessels that are hitting from places like Venezuela and Colombia. The 10th strike, I believe, happened on Friday. We're talking about some 40-plus people that have been killed here without any due process, unless due process means essentially taking the word of the government here that these are alleged narco-traffickers, that this is part of the war against drug trafficking in the region. The United States seeking to counter the number of deaths related to drug consumption in the United States. And so this has been a very forward-leaning posture here by the United States. But the United Nations human rights experts have condemned this action by the U.S. They believe it is a violation of international law. They believe that the strikes against these boats amount to extrajudicial killings. The United States believes that they are acting within the remit of the law because they have labeled a number of these drug cartels operating outside from countries in that region as narco terrorists, and so they believe they're justified in taking them out. And a great deal of concern. Venezuela, Oliver, has gone to the UN Security Council to complain. They believe that there is an imminent a possible land attack that is brewing now in the region, and a lot of questions as to why this is happening now. Is this about resources? Is this about oil in Venezuela? And so this is something that, they've just deployed this USS Gerald Ford, the largest aircraft carrier in the world. It is a group, so it's accompanied by submarines, by destroyers, by cruise missile elements and materials. And so we could be on the verge of something really, really escalatory here, and who knows where that goes.
Yeah, Trump is off to Asia this week, which will include an official visit to Xi Jinping. Meanwhile, Ramaphosa is also in Asia. In fact, he's in Southeast Asia, where he's engaging and will be participating in the ASEAN summit. Give us a sense of what's expected over there in those visits across the Asian subcontinent.
It's the longest trip abroad for the president since resuming office in January this year. It takes him on a 5-day tour to Asia, stops in Malaysia. He's in Malaysia right now. He then goes on to Japan, where he'll meet the new female prime minister, the first female prime minister in the history of that country. And then an all-important meeting, Oliver, with Xi Jinping, the president of China. And of course, the fundamental issue here is trade, right? The two largest economies have been at each other's throats since the unilateral imposition of reciprocal tariffs against countries around the world. And you saw that escalation earlier this year, over 100% tariffs, that 100% tariffs will be imposed because of limits that China export controls that China has placed on its exports of rare earth minerals and magnets. And so there's been an escalation in terms of China's posture here. They are not buying certain products from US farmers, soybeans in particular, hurting soybean farmers here in the United States. There's also conversation around the ownership of TikTok in the United States. Will China acquiesce to that sale, portions of that company to US control? These are some of the issues that are going to be discussed, but also in terms of just the optics, right? The two leaders of the world's largest economies that have essentially been trading blows via trade mechanisms over the last few months. It'll be interesting to see how this pull aside, we understand, that will happen in South Korea goes. We don't expect a formal agreement to emanate from this meeting, but certainly will be closely watched in terms of where we go from here.
Yeah, and then just very importantly here is Francesca Albanese has had what was a really successful lecture in South Africa, the annual Nelson Mandela lecture that took place. And while she was on stage, a tip-off came to Naledi Pandor that she would be served with papers by an organization in the US that wanted to make use of the mutual legal assistance treaty between South Africa and the US. What are the details there?
Well, this is not new, right? The United States sanctioned Francesca Albanese, who's the UN Special Rapporteur, essentially an independent expert that is mandated by the Human Rights Council in Geneva to investigate human rights abuses or the human rights situation, if you will, in the occupied Palestinian territories, which includes Gaza, which includes the West Bank, which includes East Jerusalem. And so in July of this year, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State here in the US, sanctioned Albanese, freezing her assets in the United States, any bank account she might have here. She's not allowed to travel to the United States, and that has precluded her from coming to give her report, her annual report to the Third Committee of the UN General Assembly. She's unable to fly to New York to deliver that to deliver that report. And a number of human rights experts, some of our colleagues within the Special Rapporteur mandate, issued a statement in August saying that sanctioning a special rapporteur for fulfilling her human rights mandate, Oliver, as given to her by the Human Rights Council, is a direct attack on the human rights system. It violates violates the 1946 Convention on the privileges and immunities that are afforded to the United Nations and its staff. And it is in this context that it cannot be separated, they say, from the egregious international crimes and human rights abuses that have been perpetrated against the Palestinian people over the years. And so you saw there a very emotional Albanese. She's been a target of international criticism for her very strong positions on what is happening in the occupied Palestinian territory. But it also comes in a broader context, right? The United States has not just only sanctioned Francesca Albanese, but they've also sanctioned individuals, judges, prosecutors affiliated with the International Criminal Court that has also been investigating these crimes. And so she is caught up now in this new US posture as it defends its closest ally in the region, Israel. But where we go from here, it's very interesting, because the United States is seeking to very much undermine the mandate given here by the United Nations, which the UN itself says is setting a dangerous precedent for where we go in terms of the mandates of special rapporteurs.
Sherwin, thank you so much for that. Really do appreciate it. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC correspondent there, telling us what is on his diary for the International Affairs week ahead.